morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, LinkedIn Live, good morning, YouTube, people of YouTube. It's taken a while to connect through, so I'm going to just fill a little bit here while people kind of find out where we are. Good morning, Alex Holmes.
Morning, Cheryl. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for joining me, Alex. And I feel like we almost didn't make it because of our various technical issues, but here we are, right?
Yeah, the computer was deciding what it wanted to do this morning, so find the other device.
Yeah, and I had like the black screen of death. It's just and this, I don't know whether maybe it's an AI thing. I'm getting slightly obsessed with AI at the moment, right?
Okay.
People have been giving me scare stories about AI, like literally like how worried we should be. So I've started. So confession time, everybody. When I was working out Alex's introduction that I'm going to read shortly, I was talking to ChatGPT to help me with the introduction. But I start off by saying hi to Chat because I'm like, we need to be nice to this AI thing.
Sometimes I'm like, hey, and it's like, hey, how can I help you? Like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Set the tone.
Yeah. Because when AI turns on us,
right, we still must have manners. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I'm saying? Because as we log in with our Google accounts, and it knows where we are.
So, absolutely. I was even searching on ChatGPT the other day. What are some of the things that we should be worried about with AI? And it was giving me examples of like, AI systems that had like tried to avoid being switched off and all kinds of things. It's crazy, right?
When you ask ChatGPT about AI, it's like it's dry snitching on itself. I'm just like, I caught you in a lie. Like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
I'm asking AI about itself. It's a bit weird.
Yeah, exactly. I am. So for anybody that's watching, we're just kind of giving people time to find us because I know the tech's struggling to connect to LinkedIn at the moment. But I am going to get somebody on here, an AI expert, because there's a lot to unpack, man. AI in terms of what it means for the future of work. What it means for kind of how we interact socially. Maybe we'll get onto that a little bit actually. AI friends, AI boyfriends and girlfriends. There's all kinds of crazy stuff. Yeah, and therapy. Yeah. Whether AI is really going to like change the face of that, and actually whether it can replace it anyway. So who knows where we're going to go in today's conversation. But if you're joining us live, good morning. Please do say good morning in the chat. I know the tech is being a little bit up and down at the moment. So I've got with me Alex Holmes, who and I only discovered Alex. So I discovered Alex, I think, as I said in my post. I saw you, Alex, on the To Be a Boy podcast.
Right.
And there's just something, and I was out on my morning walk, sort of power walking, so like in the countryside. And then, Elliott, Ray and Joelie Brearley on, and Alex came on. And I'm going to say, okay, Junior, you're cracking me up already. Good morning. I know a great AI expert. I can connect you with Oprah. Junior calls me Oprah.
Yeah, you know what? Claim it. Well, claim parts of it.
Do you know what? I love that. I love that. Good morning, Junior. Yeah, any AI you can experts, I'd love to connect. So I've got one person, but there's probably way more conversations to have about AI. I want to say, oh, and Junior works with Employee Networks. Junior is, I'm going to say, maybe has recently, or is coming to the end of his tenure managing the Rainbow Network at NatWest, an employee network that's been going for like something like nearly 20 years or something. I want to say, Junior. Obviously, Junior's not been running it that long because he's only like, in his 20s. He's not really. But so I want to say, Alex, when I first heard you on the podcast, did I hear you say that you had been for a spa day or something like that with Elliott, or did I hear that right?
You know what? The thing is, people are going to stop inviting me onto these things. I just air out all of our business just offline. Yeah.
Was that right though? It was.
You're correct. You're correct. No, yeah. So every so often, we meet up and we just go to like a spa. We just sit there. We just chat, but also in a sauna. Why not?
Do you know what though? When I heard that, I just knew you were the person I had to have a conversation with, because I'm like, I don't know, you know, spa days is something that I do with my female friends. I've got 3 kind of best friends that we all work together in our 20s, and so every now and again, all 4 of us might go, or sometimes just, you know, a couple of us. And to hear a guy talking about going on a spa day, especially a black man as well, right? And we can talk about, you know, the intersection and hypermasculinity and all of that. But to hear a black man talking about going on a spa day with another black man, I thought, I need to speak to that man.
Listen,
and okay,
we're on a new vibe this generation. I'm telling you now, like, we're having spa days. We're going on long walks. We're going on hikes. You know,
yeah,
we're getting breakfasts together. Like, we're doing all sorts of stuff.
I love it.
I think it's so important, especially just with the whole bonding piece as well. And just having, that's really important for me. Just really having the one time or the group collective experience. Just, I mean, once a month with a group of friends, we go on a walk. Each of us decide once a month which one we're going on. Sometimes it's somewhere south or not, wherever, and we just go for a walk for the whole day. We talk, we catch up, and then we just go to eat at the end, and then that's our Sunday kind of thing. So and I just find it just so important, you know, just to get outside and really just kind of have that dedicated time where we're just kind of in with one another. That's, you know, that's a clear,
it's great to hear, and it's great to see. Even on my morning walk today, so I walk near to like a big hill, like in Shropshire, and even at the bottom on a Friday, I often see like a men's group finishing up at the bottom, and they're all hugging each other and whatever. And I just think it's really cool to see. Anyway, haven't even introduced Alex properly yet, so let me do that right. So that's how I found Alex. But anybody that's followed Alex recently, or if you haven't, you should do. The one thing, as soon as I started following you, because so obviously I'd heard you on this podcast, but then when I started following you on LinkedIn, and I love books, right? And I love reading. So reading your writing, I mean, if anybody hasn't followed Alex and read just even your posts, right? Obviously, I haven't, read your book or anything, but your writing is incredibly beautiful. Like, it's seriously good writing. So Alex Holmes is a writer, therapeutic practitioner, longtime advocate for men's mental health, love, belonging, connection. I feel like I need to read that, given your writing, and host of the Time to Talk podcast. Are you still podcasting? Oh, there's the book. There's the book. Are you still podcasting?
I put the podcast on hold for a bit while I figure out direction, but there's still episodes.
Okay. And you've had some seriously big names on that podcast, right? You know, one, the actor David Harewood, who, you know, a lot of people know, really well-known British actor who's spoken a lot actually in this space, and then also some other US voices as well. So into this work, you're bringing, you know, like your clinical training, lived experience, and a decade of media work. You don't look old enough. To everything that you do, from school counselling and coaching to leadership roles within Beyond Equality, Movember, and the Open Minds Alliance. So this is ChatGPT talking now. So whether you're working with at-risk boys, challenging outdated narratives about manhood, or helping organizations support men without feeding backlash, you are one of the most thoughtful voices on what real support for men should look like today. That's what ChatGPT said, but I agree.
All right, shout out the bot. Shout out the robot. No, thank you for that. No, I appreciate that. It's been a very interesting experience going through all of this in the way that it's kind of navigated. I think when I first put out the book in 2021, not many people were talking about men's mental health in the way that we're speaking about it now. And I love the development that it's kind of gone through in that there are loads of conversations being had around how men relate, what that looks like in the workplace, as we're talking on this, but what that looks like in our families since the pandemic happened. You know, what it means. We're really, I mean, it is part of the zeitgeist right now, isn't it, to ask about gender and ask, what does it mean to each person, or what does it mean collective understanding? So it's a really interesting conversation to be had.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeannie says there's so many people I know love Alex. Looking forward to this. Obviously, I'm very late to the Alex party, right? I'm late to the Alex fan club, clearly. Amazing.
No, it's on time.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. Okay, well, let's get into this. I mean, we started there talking about like and I sort of said that one of the reasons that I wanted to speak to you was that conversation that you had about spending time with somebody just as men. So maybe we should start there in terms of men and friendship and the importance of that and how that's represented. What are your thoughts just around that? Are we finally moving in the right direction? Sorry.
With men and friendship, I think the conversations around men and friendship is interesting. I think that when we look at, like, if we were to just pay close attention to the media, like films, TV shows, or whatnot, we would look at, when we're talking about pure male friendships, we look at, it's usually described as this bumbling idiot kind of group of boys who are men who are growing up and trying to figure out what it's like to grow up together, and then they become adult men together, and then that's them, and then until they find something, and then that is, like, whether that be a family or a new job or whatever, and then that's kind of the case, right? And I don't actually agree with that kind of stereotyping. And then there was a TV show I watched called A Million Little Pieces. I think it's called A Million Little Pieces, and it follows a group of friends who went to university together. They all went to Harvard or whatnot. Follows a group of friends and their families together, and then when they have a tragic loss of one, it's like make or break for the friendship group, in a sense. Like they're dealing with themselves, and then they have to try and figure out all of that, what that's been going on. And it's one of the most accurate representations of what male friendship actually is, just as men. They're all aware that they are men. They're all aware that they're old enough to know better. They're all aware that they've got responsibilities. They're all aware that they're aware of the things, right? But obviously they make mistakes because they're human, right? And it's the friendships that they're in that hold them accountable to the things that they're supposed to do. And those are the friendships that I understand to be around men. And I'm watching loads of, when we're reading loads of, like, articles around how men don't have any friends, how men don't know how to form relationships, how men are socially inept, how men are this, that, and the other. It just becomes this long list of things that men are not, and men can't do, and men are causing all of these things. And I just find that a bit challenging as an idea as well, especially when I see a lot of people, like, working as a coach, and working as a therapist and speaking to men. So, like, I do ask the men that I work with, like, do you have a good friendship group? And they will say, yeah. And I'll be like, tell me about it. And they have good friends, a lot of them. They have a network of people that they can go to. They have people that they can go and speak to about what's going on. So I think it's less dramatic than we actually think it is, but there is a huge, but it is serious though. There are a lot of men out there who don't have anybody to go to. I think that does need to be said. It's just that when it's being depicted as this bumbling idiot kind of person who can't connect with anybody and is making a fool of himself wherever he goes, I just think it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I think there was even a meme, I want to say, of, like, well, either just a meme or a short video that was doing the rounds maybe like a couple of years ago, where there was like this is even, I don't even almost want to say it, but it was like, say, for example, it was like a Saturday afternoon, and it was like showing women literally like taking their husbands or their partners to like a park or something to make friends. Like, it was so insulting.
It was insulting. I mean, it depends on how the lens you look at it. I think it's funny, because when you think about the amount of time a lot of men spend a lot of their time at work, and just by way of how society has kind of structured things, right? A lot of men spend a lot of time at work, and there are a lot of men who just don't have fun. And I think that it's kind of like, well, when you ask a certain demographic of men, oh, when did you last have fun? What brings you joy? Or all this kind of, they can't answer the question. They don't know. They haven't really had the opportunity to explore that, just depending on the kind of way that they were raised, their racial background, their ethnic background, their class background. You know, sometimes you just weren't able to express that. So when you get the opportunity to jump on a trampoline or jump in a play or do or play football or, you know, just do some foolishness.
A
thing where you're like, yeah, I can do that, because typically men aren't supposed to have fun, you know, in the way that, you know, women are allowed to have leisure time. You know what I mean? So, like, you know, which is why you find it shocking that I said I went for the spa, because it's like, okay, like you found that shocking. But again, I can understand, because socially it's not something that is usual. So I found that funny, because it's like sometimes you just want to just be taken care of. It's okay. Go play around for like an hour and come back. You know, life will be waiting.
Absolutely. It's so interesting. Good morning, George. Good morning. Excellent points. We need to move beyond the caveman description of it being entirely men's inability or unwillingness that limits emotional expression or help seeking. For sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Okay. Why do you think? So we talked about the fact that there does seem to be now more focus on men and boys in particular, and obviously there was the whole like adolescence moment, if I call it that, and a few things on the back of it. Why do you think people are finally starting to pay attention to men's needs and their mental health, and are we doing enough?
I've always been of the opinion that systems don't change, well, especially in this area, systems don't change unless men do. And sometimes the conditions do need to change for men in order for that to happen. Unfortunately, it is a psychological experience. It's a kind of it's what's going on psychically, right? There's a lot that's happening. There are certain structures that men need to work through in themselves, you know, like reframing what it means to be a provider and protector, and what that looks like. Because, you know, we think about it, you know, it's been depicted to us all through those films in the 80s and 90s of, like, you know, what's his name, Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Bruce Willis and all these guys just jumping out of buildings and doing all this kind of stuff, Mission Impossible, Bad Boys, all of this different stuff, like all these action films. And then you've got the complete other parallel of like romance films where you've got like The Notebook and Time Traveler's Wife and all these things, right? But again, I think that when it comes to this stuff, we need to look at, with men, it's looking at how are we protecting people emotionally? How are we providing for people emotionally? How are we supporting those things, right? How are we then stepping into spaces where people then feel safe with us to be able to conversation, let alone dive in front of you to take a bullet, right? So it's kind of all of those things. If you're in your home and you know and you are part of the quote unquote leadership team of your house, then you've got to, you know, if your children step into the space, are they stepping into the space and are they comfortable stepping into the space where you are? Are they worried when your car pulls up? Do that, you know, like just little things like that. That are happening, but because we've been so conditioned to think of it in such a rigid way, we're not actually thinking about how we are really being self-aware enough to understand how other people feel, but also knowing that we need to take ownership of how we feel and be able to have the conversation of when something is not right, and then have that conversation going forward. Somebody the other day, relationships, like, you know, platonic, romantic, collegiate, all of those things, they are supposed to be difficult. They are supposed to be hard. We're supposed to have challenges in those areas, right? Sometimes it's easy. We can have fun, we can laugh, we can do all these things. What happens when you have a disagreement? What happens when you don't? What happens when you have a values clash? What happens? Those are the times where we actually need to really kind of really knuckle and double down on the relationship. Well, so that's kind of one of the things I would say on that.
I just want to sort of come back to something that you said, which I've never really thought about this, but you said about taking almost like that protector provider role to almost like the emotional well-being, the emotional state of those around you, your family, etc., rather than it just being the rigid, I put food on the table or I protect you physically. Which I've never heard anybody, sort of like talk about it in that way, which is great. I guess my follow-on question from that is, and I guess around a lot of this actually, where and how are men going to kind of like get that learning from? Because I'm guessing that in terms of the how to be a man or how to be a father or how to be a partner or whatever, a lot of that's just coming through what you've observed or what you have experienced as. Do you know what I mean? So there's almost like this, if there is to be a reframing of, say, masculinity beyond, like to George's point, beyond the caveman kind of thing. But if you've been brought up, effectively by men that kind of had that sort of fairly rigid views and potentially in a structure that worked, where maybe the mom was at home, was the homemaker and the man was how and where do men get those different inputs that start to even provide a different way of being? Do you know what I mean? Like to offer a different way of being.
It's about the community that you're part of and the community you have around you, right? I think that what we struggle with is the reaching out and the connecting with different kinds of men to get different perspectives and different views. If you're in a community of men who are, and they're just like the men that you just grew up with or whatever, for example, and you all have the same values and you all have the same ideas and you all have the same things and you're all going through the same thing economically, romantically, there has to be something there that is causing something to not change, right? And when you we know, like, that's why we, my generation, when we like being, for me in my family and being the first to go to university and whatnot, was really good for us because we could then got friends from different parts of the country, different parts of the world, different experience, different ideas, different things, learning about new things. So we can have conversations with other people about other things, and I think that's why things like men's groups are really important and really impactful right now, and they are moving quite steadily. And they are growing quite steadily, because I think that it gives the opportunity and the ability to listen to other men, one, who may or may not share similar experiences to you, but can actually have input into the things that you kind of share and whatnot. And also gives you the opportunity to actually speak as well, to kind of like be challenged on some of those ideas. And I think a good foundational relationship is one that both encourages you and challenges you to be better version of yourself. Sometimes I think it's not enough to say, oh, that's how my dad did it, that's how my mum did it, that's all that's not enough anymore. It's like, okay, but what are you going to do? Bruce Lee say this, like, you take the best and leave the rest, like, and just kind of like but it's about really understanding what the best is. Sometimes, yes, if you are going to embark upon creating a family and building a family in that way, there may be times where you are going to have to probably work longer. There probably are going to be times where you're going to have to make sure that they are safe and physically protected and feel physically safe. There probably are going to be times like that, but we are living in a time where we are actually taking into consideration how the people around us are actually feeling, but also how we're feeling at the same time. So it's a lot of work, because we are human beings and we have work to do.
Absolutely. And I mean, I love what you said about there's a couple of things. I love what you said about the group and the information that the group, because I guess it's a bit like, there's that term, isn't there, like when you've got sometimes like a closed loop and there is no new information coming in. But I think what you're saying is, when, for example, if you have, like, say, a men's group where maybe there are people that have had other experiences, etc., that then brings potentially different perspectives in terms of how we then learn to do things differently. And just going back to something that you said about the protecting and providing thing, and it kind of ties in a little bit to the adolescence thing, because when I thought back to adolescence, what was interesting about the father in that show was he wasn't physically violent within the home, apart from I think when the one time when he pulled down the garden shed or something, right? But he wasn't violent, but he clearly, because of like how he, you know, dealt with and or repressed his anger, that there wasn't really that almost like psychological safety, right, in that home. Do you know what I mean? Because it was almost, the anger was almost like just always below the surface. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense, Alex?
And that's also a really tense thing to do. A tense place to be. If you know that the volcano is going to erupt, you don't know when, but it's going to erupt.
Yeah.
At that point, you're always going to be living on the edge of something, because there's that tension there that gets there. And with that character in adolescence, again, I don't want to be like my father and the way that he's treated me, so I'm not going to be like that with my kids. But instead of replacing it with what he could be, he's just stopped because he doesn't know how. So those things like, and then so they don't even get to access to you. You see, like it's kind of like we don't have you. So marriage is a very, very static relationship. Like you are father, I am child. That's all it is. You're not my dad kind of thing. You know, that's sort of thing. Like you don't actually have that kind of thing. You know what I mean? So, and again, everybody's just trying their best to be the best version of who they can be at any given point. I like to think most people aren't. You know, but you know, I'm not going to try to debate nuances. But like at the same time, you know, I like to think that everyone's trying their best to be the best, to be who they, how they know how to be the best version of. But and I just think that he kind of he put a stopgap on how he could express. And I have another point on adolescence, but I don't know if you've got in between.
Go ahead if you've got another point. I'll talk about adolescence all day. Somebody will let me.
I was going to say that there was a one thing I noticed within the show is that all the men lacked empathy in some way, and they didn't know how to express it at any given point. From the lawyer, from the solicitor in the police station, he saw the dad acting the way he was, but he didn't know how to connect with him on a level to just be like, all right, I understand where you're coming. Like, cause that's all he wanted. The dad wanted to understand what was going on. Understand that he was kind of like that he was going through some sort of really tense idea sort of thing going on there. And then obviously him to his son, because his son asked for him. And he was like, okay, but like he didn't know what to bring to that space. The police officer and his son, the police officer in general, and then the teachers, the male teachers were very like, this is just a job. Or they were very just hard on, and they're like, this is what needs to happen. So you've got the men just really displayed a low understanding of empathy in a way that wasn't transactional. You see, they only understood transactional relationship.
I do.
And that is the difficulty when it comes to the way that men and boys are socialized, because if everything is transactional, what happens when you don't get what you want? That's when the gateways to violence lead, and then it's just this whole thing. And
I love that. That's why I'm talking to you this morning. You know, this is why I'm talking to you, because I tell you what, nobody's mentioned that. You're absolutely spot on in terms of how all of the men are. And as you were talking, and it kind of almost like links to this next question I had about the assumptions and the misunderstandings we have of men. And I'm thinking, I'm going back to the videos I watched with the writers and the creator talking about it, and I don't think it's come up at all. But you're absolutely spot on that in terms of the multidimensionality of men, if that's even a word, right? In terms of being able to demonstrate, you know, empathy and that emotional intelligence. You're absolutely right. Not one male character in that show had that. And then when I think about real life, I mean, obviously, right, there's I know a lot of men that do have way more empathy than was demonstrated in the show, and that's just so that's really got me thinking. It's so fascinating. And I guess does that link to, would you say that's a common assumption, either like lack of empathy, or just, as you say, because maybe of how boys and men are typically socialized, we assume that men don't have those relational skills, or we assume that they can't do X, Y, and Z as well as women. Does that link into that?
There are a lot of assumptions. Yeah, that's for sure. I think that I do think that it's not. I think that empathy is a skill in some aspects.
Okay.
I don't think it's actually empathetic. I think that some people, it develops over time.
Okay. So you wouldn't say, for example, that women are naturally empathetic. Because there are those stereotypes, aren't they? That women are good at doing the nurturing, and men don't. Do you think that that's maybe a false?
I feel like it's down to the gender socialization of how we interact with one another. So if you were to just plant yourself, I'm just going back to when I was in primary school. If you were just to plant yourself into a primary school, you probably would see how the boys communicate versus how the girls communicate, and what is expected of the girls communicate and what's expected of them they communicate, right? So when it comes to school, it's all of a sudden it's competition, but it's individualized competition within teamwork, if that makes any sense. So it's like you all have your position to play, we all have to win. So if you play your position, then you can do that. So you know what you have to do in order for the thing. Whereas I feel like when I think about how girls socialize, it's just a lot more communal. It's a lot more like together. We are working together in this thing. So I think it's just about the socialization of things, but I think not in one place, but they all converge at another point. And I think that it's not beyond men to be to develop strong sense of empathy.
For sure.
And at all. But again, without getting into the nuances, it's like, there's the empathy gap with reading, for example. So, reading fiction, it's statistically is proven neurologically as well, just emotionally, to help develop empathetic skills, because you are getting into the mind of a character, and then this character, and you're empathizing with the character's mode and motivation and all of the things to go through and their drives and whatnot. And the more fiction that you read, it's thought that the more empathetic you become, because you begin to understand different within different understanding. And when we look at the publishing industry, for example, if you were to go into a shop and you look at the young adult section, a lot of the books are targeted towards young girls. That's because they read more. So therefore they know as a market that they can get that out. There are books for young men out there. It's getting young men into reading as well. And you've got the questions around ADHD, and then all of the other bits. So it just becomes this kind of like, oh, but what about this? But what about that? But what about this? So I mean, men can develop that skill of empathy and kind of really get into that. Sorry.
I've got a question for you. I want to test a hypothesis with you, right? It's live science, live research. And thank you for your point, Safi, about socialization. I am going to ask about socialization and the empathy bit and how we develop that, because you said something about potentially, boys and men almost like being socialized maybe to be more transactional, and then when things don't work out and you can't resolve it, then it maybe turns into violence. There's an interesting bit of research that I've come across recently, which basically says that in terms of levels of aggression of toddlers, that the genders are roughly the same, right? Girls are just as likely to be as aggressive physically as boys, but then during those very early years, the girls have it. I don't want to say beaten out of them, but the girls have it restrained. The girls are told not to be physical, not to be aggressive, etc. And I wonder whether that links to then the girls almost like being forced to develop those relational skills. Because if you're a girl, 2-3-year-old, and you're being told that you can't hit somebody, or you can't, to get your own way, you have to then develop your other skills, right? My theory, my hypothesis is, if we were to do the same with boys, if we were to, restrain that kind of aggression, the physical aggression, would that maybe socialize boys to again be, start to develop those relational skills and be more empathetic? It's just a theory.
Potentially. I guess it's about what the motivation is as well. I think that, when you start to curb behavior to control somebody versus conserve behavior because you want them to, I think it's like whenever anyone's teaching a lesson, there's always a reason behind the lesson, especially, and as a toddler, you do pick that up, especially over time. It's how to redirect that energy, redirect that, that kind of that energy. So again, I don't know what that is, because I'm not necessarily a scientist in that field, but I would like to think that could happen, definitely. That you could be kind of like channel any frustration, any kind of boisterous behavior into something that's positive, and how they can learn to do that. I think that they would do that for sure.
Interesting, very interesting. And in terms of some of the things that we get wrong about men and boys, so you obviously you have worked directly with lots of boys and men, particularly in groups. Is there anything that you've come across that would surprise people, like in corporate, especially like in HR or in this world of DEI, etc., that we could maybe learn from, even just in terms of understanding our male colleagues in organizations?
Men do talk. They talk a lot, as you can see. But men do talk. They talk a lot. Number one, they're just very selective about what they talk about and what that means. Because again, when you're socialized and conditioned to not trust anybody, it becomes this whole thing of just like, you can't trust everybody with your information. And I think to some extent that kind of can be true. People can use information against you, but again, growing up is just, you never say when you're upset, you would never say when you're feeling X, Y, and Z. Because also you don't know if anybody cares, number one, and also you're not going to get comforted in a way that, well, when I was younger, you wouldn't get comforted in a way that you would need to or would like to be comforted, and you don't even know what that comfort looks like. And it's construed into many different ideas, and it's just because again, you don't have that. If you don't have a model for what that looks like, all of a sudden get it can be quite dangerous on how it's then received by the subject. Which is one thing that I would say. So let's say men do talk, men do talk, and when they are in circles, when they do have the clear guidelines, the clear boundaries, the clear, the clear direction of kind of what the group is and what that looks like, men speak. Men speak. Men, it's an exercise in learning to listen, empathizing with one another. Giving feedback, understanding disagreement, what that means, recognizing difference, a lot of different things. So that is one thing. But also, if we're talking about HR and whatnot, I think men do need support in the workplace. You need support in the workplace, and I know that there's reservations about having men's groups, what's the word?
Like networks, ERGs, and employee resource groups.
There's restrictions like that because I know there's the idea of you don't want to create a men's club or like a private network club where there's people are putting each other on to all these other things, and I can understand that, but when it's done properly, which or understanding what a men's network would or could look like, which in my view would be men's group work, therapeutic group work, or reflection or reflective practice kind of experiences. for dads, for new career enters, for early career enters, for graduate, if you had those kinds of networks, I think that would create a lot more of a collegiate experience, especially in certain industries where competition is high and high performance is the standard. Right. But also, I guess, with those sorts of organizations, from my point of view, it's better for them to have men in competition with one another, because it plays to the ego of a man to kind of be able to get to where they need to get to next. Again, that's just the wheel of capitalism. Right. I do think that there is something in that. Someone's going to burn out, and the wheel is really fall off the cart, and someone's out getting that wheel back on. But how we do that is important. So there just needs to be a bit more in how that happens and what that looks like.
I think, there's a few things that you said there, and I wrote some things down in terms of men. First of all, men do speak and they do need support. And the thing about the groups, and I know Hardev was on. Good morning, Hardev. I know Hardev was on as well, and Hardev runs a men's group in an organization. So it'd be interesting to maybe get his take around this as well. And Safia, I can see that you've put some comments as well on this. There is something about, and you talked about how do we sort of like set them up in a way, and how is it done, etc. The needs of different groups are different, right? But there is something about, I guess I almost couldn't help going to, would people, there's two things. First of all, would people assume that almost like, and I think this is the fear that I think that people have about men's groups in organizations is that they will therefore, in quote unquote, continue to have an unfair advantage, right? Is the way some people would see it. But I love what you said about capitalism and the system, and without getting too political, I think you're right that organizations do need to like reflect on their culture, reflect on their competitive culture and what it is they are demanding of individuals in a very sort of like high performance, aggressive culture, and those that are at the bottom of that, and what that culture spews out, if I use that term, do you know what I mean? And surely it's valid that you have to have some sort of support mechanism if that's the sort of culture you want, right?
Yeah. There's a film on Netflix called Old Dads.
Okay.
Which is starring Bill Burr, and there are a few other guys in there, and it basically just follows them because they're a group of friends. They worked in a company together, like when it was a startup, and they're middle-aged dads now. So some of them had kids late, or some of them have are on their second marriage or whatever, and they're kind of trying to navigate a world which is so different to the world. They want their kids to just play outside in the grass. Why do they have to be picked up every minute, or kind of, like mollycoddled, quote unquote, and all this sort of stuff, or they're in companies, and the companies are now being taken over by a startup, and it's like this millennial startup, and he's like, well, we need the vision to look like this, and they're trying to manage out the old heads of the thing. And I think that the point I'm bringing up about that is that they have a very unique way of seeing the world, and it's so valid and valuable. And without being able to sit down with intergenerationally and have a conversation as to what the future and the direction and the culture of the company is, rather than just saying, you're old, you're wrong, this is different now, we need to move this way. It does something to your identity and the way that you view the world and your worldview, right? Not all world, like, like some people are going to have really tricky ways of thinking, and you need to being able to be in a conversation with somebody and having a chat with them and being able to be like, well, here's why I think this, and this is the reason why I feel like that way. What do you think of this? And how can we meet the common ground, in a sense? And I think that men's groups and the men's circles, they kind of level the playing field in a way that actually allows you to then be on some sort of general consensus as to how to then move forward together. Because I love sitting down with older guys and hearing kind of like where they're coming from and what it was like before. When I was in journalism, just listening to the older journalists, asking them what it was like before. I know what it's like now because obviously, you know, I'm younger and I'm in the space.
Yeah.
But then asking them what it was like before and kind of like getting some tips on some stuff because they would have had certain ideas about things. But then also, you know, again, like I said before, getting the best thing and taking the best thing and running with it is good, because sometimes they can be wrong or what they think is just not fit for now. I mean, but also kind of informing them on that too is like, well, we don't really say that nowadays because of X, Y, and Z, and they'll be like, oh, okay. And that's when an older person will be like, yeah, the young guys are telling me, they're teaching me. And I love that kind of intergenerational thing. And I think a men's reflective thing or a men's group in a workplace would be very beneficial for stuff like that, because then the older guys don't feel like they're being kind of managed out or kind of behind the tread on what's going on. Younger guys actually benefit from a lot of wisdom that's going on. There's going to be older dads in there. There's going to be younger dads in there. There's going to be you know, in a position that you probably want to get to in 5-10 years time. So what is together? You know, and when you start to be scared, it just becomes this thing. That's when the culture starts to become intense, and then you're just trying to, can't be us with all that.
No, I love that in terms of especially the thought of the intergenerational, and that I've never heard of old dads, but it sounds really interesting. Clearly, it doesn't come up on my Netflix algorithm. All I get is I won't even tell you what I get. But, no, all I get is like I'm even embarrassed to say, right? I'm not going to go there. Okay. But a really interesting. No, it's a lot of chick flick stuff because it's usually I'm just decompressing when I'm so Hardev says, I feel your culture is built amongst communities, and to have communities brought into organizations, our immense network, it creates a sense of purpose and community and brings people together. Absolutely, Hardev. And then a question here from Tom, which I think is interesting. And Tom very much, I want to say, I think runs groups that are quite intergenerational, if I'm not wrong. So high performance and empathy in an organization. Is it too much to ask for both, Alex?
Is it too much?
Good question.
Is it too much to ask for both, Cheryl? I think the way the question is positioned means that one has to be sacrificed to the other, and I don't think, or one is being sacrificed for another. I think you can have both, definitely. I think you can have both, definitely, but I also think that that one kind of runs faster than the other, in a sense. And I say that to mean, if you're in a high performance culture that requires you to meet deadlines, to consistently hit targets, to meet KPIs, to do all this kind of stuff, to be on job, to be on time, to be on this side. When empathy gets placed on the table, it slows down the conversation. It slows things down. So you start to then, so it's kind of like this thing where you have to then kind of like tune down the high performance and then tune up the empathy. And I just don't think that, like, I'm even using it as like robot screws. I find that interesting because it's like, are we there yet?
Yeah.
Can I demand from you to be on time, to get the deadline done, to do all these things, and still be like, but I also I give you leeway because I care about that you got to that's happened. Or can you do that? I don't know. But I do think that the way I look at it energetically, I think that high performance is a lot faster than empathy allows, and empathy slows down. And I think that if you're in a result or culture, then it might be difficult to do that. So they might need to be separated from the main body of work.
I think that's really interesting. I think that's a really interesting point. I'm formulating a point. I'm just pausing to say good morning to Denise Myers. Alex, do you know Denise?
we're connected.
Perfect. Denise Myers off of the Black Talent Awards, amazing awards organization. Good morning. Love the conversation. Intergenerational is overlooked. And I know Denise has got a son as well. So I'm sure this is a really relevant conversation. The thing about the high performance and empathy, I think here's the thing, and I think I'm getting ready to do a post where I'm really going to go in on this around kind of like hard work and work-life balance and all of that stuff. I wonder, because I think I'm with you a little bit, Alex, in terms of I think it can be difficult to do both, or to have a culture that is really schools really high on both. I wonder whether for some, because and I think when you think about, for example, standout founders and startups, they weren't particularly high on empathy, right? That's almost how they did it. They were just like performance. And I wonder, is there something about, do you have to almost like outsource the empathy to somebody else, right? Rather than always trying to do all of that in one. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there is that thing, like when it comes to startups, empathy is low.
Yeah, because it's all about delivery.
They got things to do. They got they got investors to please. They got shareholders and things. They got to make sure that their vision actually works. And as I said, in some cultures, when I say cultures, I mean like some work cultures, it works. And sometimes startups do attract a very particular person.
Yeah. And it's not for everyone. Yeah. Interesting. And so Sophia's put, what is that phrase? If you want to go fast, be in it for yourself. I think go it alone or something. If you want to go far, go together. So that I guess is maybe a slightly different angle on the empathy versus performance. Jenna Jackman holds a very special place in my heart. Hello, Jenna. I agree, Alex. I'm very empathetic, and I find it difficult in my business to do both. It is hard. Jenna's an amazing entrepreneurial woman. Like, just
I find so I'm big on like callings, and this is what you you do things that work in the way that they're supposed to work. And I'm not. I've said to like several friends that I'm just not entrepreneurial. I'm entrepreneurial minded. So if I was to go into an organization, I can actually create ideas and kind of move that way. But to be an entrepreneur is a completely different thing. That's a whole skill set. Kind of shout out to anybody that can do that, because there's just a level of empathy that it's very hard to. It's just a level of empathy. It's just very hard to really connect in that way.
Yeah.
So you have things that you need to drive forward.
Yeah. I think you're right. And I must say, based on the conversation that we had before we went live, I can attest to that you probably score really high, like on the EQ side. And where we started was with you going on a spa day, probably there's a certain flow. There's a certain
it's all right. It's all right. Like life is fast, but you got to make it slow sometimes.
And clearly that you like to kind of like operate almost like in a certain pace of flow that isn't always conducive to, as you say, the entrepreneurial hustle. I totally get that. Like, you would not be going to like Dubai to go and hustle your way through whatever, right? Like, that is not.
I thought about this, but then my cousin he went out there, and he's just a guy that's just that guy, and I'm like, I'm that guy, but it's okay. I'll go and visit. I'll walk up and down slowly on the walk, wherever it is, and I'll wave to people and I'll do whatever, and then I'll have my slow down, come back. But and I think we just need to really understand who we are in this.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But they need to be in roles that can really pull out their very specific traits and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
That can do other stuff, and then when it's how that kind of makes create this amazing dynamic of what it can do for the company and stuff. So you need those people inside organizations, but as operationally, it might not work in that sense.
Yeah, for sure. And that probably links us really nicely into the final question of this morning. What is the one thing that we need to do better to support the men in our lives and in organization? What is the one thing that we need to do better? And while you're thinking of your answer, let me just pull up this comment here. I've always felt that too not entrepreneurial, but then slowly I'm thinking maybe I just need a co-founder with a completely different personality and temperament. That is very true. You know, you sometimes see people advertising for co-founders because they haven't necessarily got the, you know, the drive, the bite, the hunger, the whatever. I totally get that. I'll have to see who it is that's left that. And then Safia, there is also the perception of senior leaders and having to make some tough and unpopular decisions that considers more than people. Yeah, finance, risk, businesses, a lot of things that we're juggling.
I don't know how people could just be in that position and lay off like 20 people and just be like, this is just what we have to do. Because I'd be like, there's Jan and her 4 kids. There's Steve just got married, and I'd be like, guys, I'll cut my salary. Like, so
you'd be posting yourself crying on LinkedIn like that CEO.
I'll be like, just make sure the tears are strong enough so that you get
take the selfie. So the one thing we can do for either the men in our lives or in organizations.
You know what? The honest answer I have is I do not know. And the thing, and the reason I do not know is because on one part of me is like, ask them what is going on, what is happening. But then the other side of me is like, will they say what is happening? Because when you're, it depends on the context and what you're put in and how all these things. So if someone's, as you said, if we're talking about in a high performance culture and they're on the middle of a deadline and they've got 4 cases and then to get through all of these things, when are you really going to ask them how they're doing? Because they clearly are stressed. So what do we do there? I think that, how do we support men better? I think it is just by making sure that you're open to, if HR, those leaders, whatnot, open to creating those, bringing in people who can work with men, who can facilitate, and then making it a part of their career progression plan. Because if that is part of their career progression plan and they have to go, they will go.
Yeah.
But because we start phrasing these things, and I know it's kind of a bit like, oh, but you need to give them the choice, and that's very permissive sometimes. Yeah. Like, go to this because I know that you've got 10 cases on, and I know that it's heavy, and I know that there's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
Or I noticed that you're leaving work later and later, or I noticed you're coming to work later and later, or you know what I mean, and these kind of. You need to go. Like, we need to make sure that the men are going to this person or to these groups or to this thing.
Yeah.
So we can actually get the best for them in this space, and we can report back to them in this space. But make it a part of the kind of thing. I think the best way to do it is to make it a part of their progression plan.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
When I was in journalism, there was a therapist in the building. Tell me if I ever went to that place. I just like, but if they said that you have to go, if they said that you have to go every other week, or subsidized by the company or whatever, or it's part of your career development plan, you need to go do this thing once a month or join this group once a month, then I'll go. But then I'll be like, oh, okay, this actually isn't so bad. You know what I mean?
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Do you think that if we were making something like that, almost like mandatory, as you're saying, would we need to do that for everybody or just certain?
I think
men.
What we mean, certain men or just men? What do you mean?
Or just would it be just the men or just certain men? Do you know what I mean?
I think that different groups require different things.
Yeah.
And I think that once you understand what the group requires, then you can start tailoring the services to that group.
Right.
But there were men. There were men when I was in newsrooms. There were men that were just like, their wives had left them, or they had left their wives, or they were caught in all this stuff, spending copious amount of time at the news desk, and nobody was thinking because they were getting work done. If they're always choosing a night shift, why are they always choosing a night shift when the day shift is optional? What is happening there?
Yeah.
Like, just start to have start to care
Yeah. So yeah, there's huh?
I'm a chief caring officer.
Chief caring officer. Yeah.
Like, you're right.
You're right, love. Yeah. I feel, you know, you said a lot there in terms of things that we can do, and I know you said about I mean, I love the fact, first of all, that you said you didn't know, because you know, we've clearly set up quite a sort of safe space for you to be able to say that, and it's absolutely cool. But you said something about almost like I guess creating the conditions where we're open to listening, right? I think that's the key, isn't it? Creating the conditions where we're open to listening to what support might be needed, and whatever that looks like, and then offering that support. And I want to go back to the listening thing as well, because I was saying to somebody, I was in a coffee shop the other day. I won't say which one because people will judge me, but I was in a coffee shop the other day, and I was I was earwigging. So a group of 4 individuals came in, 2 couples, and I was kind of like overhearing. And basically, there was one couple where every time the man went to speak, the woman would like interrupt or finish his sentences, and I couldn't help thinking. I was sitting there getting really frustrated, thinking, "Let the man speak." Do you know what I mean? It was so frustrating. And then they would ask the couple of questions, and she would always answer. And I was like, "Let the man speak. Like, he wants to speak."
It's so funny. When I was in university, I studied linguistics, and there was a module that we learned called the hegemony of language and the politics of language. And women are statistically more interrupted than men in conversation and in speech.
Yeah.
And you take over a conversation. What I have found is that men are becoming more aware of that. So when women are and also women are becoming more aware of that, obviously. So when I feel like there's an energy shift in that.
Yeah.
Men are speak in that sense, or am I going to interrupt her all the time? I'm going to let her speak, but then there's like it's jumping in. It's obviously sometimes it's a caring thing. It's I care about what you're saying, and I'm really invested in this conversation. But again, it's all about how the person receives the interruption rather than actually the act of interrupting. That makes any sense.
Absolutely, yeah.
I do find that interesting. I found that module. It was so fun.
Yeah. Amazing. Alex, we're gonna have to bring it to a close, man, because this is one of the longest. I think this is second only to the lengthy session I had with Tom Gold talking about adolescence. But I feel that part of the problem is we don't talk about these topics enough. That's why every time I get somebody on, these conversations really just go on. And obviously, and we've still got you know, George, I can see that you put your comment in there. Maybe after this, Alex will dive into the comments and add his 2 pennies onto it. Otherwise, we'll be here all day. And Alex has got a spa appointment to go to.
I got places to be.
Honestly, and everybody that has joined us today, like live, especially if you've stayed with us for the whole 1 hour, like, thank you so much, so much. And if you're watching this on the replay, if you're watching this on LinkedIn, it may only be the last 30 minutes because LinkedIn tech is going a little bit crazy. There will be the whole thing will be on YouTube. It's on a channel called ERG Strategy if you want to watch the whole thing, or I'll try to remember to drop a link below as well. Alex, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you.
Honestly, and anybody that's not following Alex Holmes on LinkedIn, please do. And and we can't wait to maybe the podcast will be revived, and whatever Alex brings out next, you know.
I'm very big on taking my time with things nowadays, and when it's ready to come back, I have some interviews I need to upload. So, but when it's ready to come back, it will definitely come back.
It will be back. Yeah, amazing, perfect. All right, Alex, thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Everyone that's been listening, have a great weekend, and go with grace.